Hi, everybody. My name is Nicholas Deslandes. I am the ADL Lab Manager for the Enhanced Performance Innovation Center located in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. So what does that mean? It means I'm responsible for the Canadian Advanced Distributed Learning Network, as well as researching new and innovative technologies for training and education within the CAF. I've designed, developed, managed, deployed 3D, mobile, VR, and AR applications for the past 8 years on the EPIC team. 5 years ago, VR, or virtual reality, started picking up in an incredible way, and everyone wanted to get their hands on it. Since then, we've made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot about how and where VR fits within the world of training. Over the years, we have put together many different styles of virtual reality applications, ranging from mobile to high-end setups and featuring all kinds of different control schemes. We've worked with many partners within Canada to discover best practices and learn from their mistakes as well. As time moves forward, the technology is moving at a jaw-dropping rate, and we're seeing changes like we've never seen before. So today I'm going to talk about VR and how you can get started with it. My goal with this presentation is to at least ensure that you leave comfortably knowledgeable on the topic of VR. If you have any questions, post them in the chat and I'll get around to answering what I can later. I may not be able to answer all your questions, but I'll certainly do my best. So most technical definitions of virtual reality leave readers with more questions than answers. Technically, virtual reality is an artificial environment which is experienced through sensory stimuli, such as sights and sounds, provided by a computer and in which one's actions partially determine what happens in the environment. I believe that a more appropriate definition is virtual reality is the use of a positionally tracked headset that allows a user to interact with an artificial environment. This interaction can be for the purpose of entertainment, training, or experience. Unlike traditional user interfaces, VR places the user inside an experience. Instead of viewing a screen in front of them, users are immersed and able to interact with 3D worlds. By simulating as many senses as possible, such as vision, hearing, touch, and even smell, the computer's transformed into a gatekeeper to this artificial world. The only limits to near-real VR experiences are the availability of content and cheap computing power. But hold up, you might say. I've heard VR is blank. VR has some confusing acronyms associated with it. Every day it seems like someone is making a new one up. With acronyms such as XR, AR, VR, and MR, it's easy to see how people find it overwhelming. So let me go over some of the major acronyms to hopefully clear some of these up. Augmented reality, or AR, adds digital elements to a live view, often by using the camera on a device. Rather than immerse users in a virtual environment, it augments the one that already exists. You can still see the world around you, but objects or scenes are placed into what you can already see. Examples of augmented reality experiences include Snapchat lenses, Pokemon Go, and IKEA Place. Virtual reality, or VR, implies a complete immersion experience that shuts out the physical world. Using VR devices such as the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, or Google Cardboard, users can be transported into a number of real-world and imagined environments, such as the middle of a squawking penguin colony or riding on an F-18 jet. The major difference here is that you're not aware of what is happening around you as your vision is immersed into a separate world. Mixed reality, or MR, combines elements of both AR and VR, real-world and digital objects interact. Mixed reality technology is just now starting to take off with the Microsoft Hololens as one of the most notable early mixed reality apparatuses. Mixed reality is unique in that the term usually refers to artificial products that interact with users in the real world. And then extended reality, XR. Extended reality is an umbrella term that covers all of the various technologies that enhance our senses, whether they're providing additional information about the actual world or creating totally unreal simulated worlds for us to experience. It includes virtual reality, VR, augmented reality, AR, and mixed reality, MR technologies. So who cares about VR? VR is at a transitional point between being an early adopter technology and being a mainstream form of media. With the release of standalone VR, so that's to say VR that's not reliant on powerful computers, more people have access to this new medium, pushing VR further into the mainstream very quickly. Many companies are recognizing this shifting trend and are starting to leverage it to improve their operations. Being that VR can provide a consequence-free training environment, the long-term financial benefits are very enticing for many companies. Here are some stats on VR. From 2020 to 2027, the compound annual growth rate of virtual reality market is 21.6%. Nearly 1 in 5, 19%, of US consumers will use VR in 2020. 52.1 million people in the US will use virtual reality technology at least once per month in 2021. And by 2030, 23 million jobs will be using AR and VR in one way or another. VR is still new, and as with any new thing, people will be skeptical, distrusting, and even fearful. This is why great care should be taken when creating VR experiences. VR has the potential to help in countless ways, but it still needs people to want it. Creating a bad product could make someone have negative feelings towards VR as a whole. Here's a mental experiment. Imagine the first touchscreen apps on iPhone were slow, unintuitive, or clunky. Smartphones probably wouldn't have become popular in mainstream. And without the boom in iPhones and then smartphones, touch panels probably wouldn't have become the de facto user interface. This would have deep consequences. This very moldable user interface is one of the main reasons smartphones were able to become so versatile, allowing users to browse the internet, write, consume content, and play games all with ease and intuitively. This ease of use paved the road for most people to have 24/7 access to the internet, bringing with it a new era of connection and access to information. VR has the potential to be the next step in technology being integrated into people's daily lives. One big strength of VR training is the variety of learner stimuli. VR utilizes sights, sounds, physical actions, and spatial awareness to facilitate learning. While some people may identify as visual learners or active learners, VR can act as a one-size-fits-all of learning because everyone can find something that clicks for them. Repetitive learning can be dramatically improved by actually performing or visualizing the learning material. VR provides a safe learning environment. When students make mistakes during the learning journey, the consequences are minimal as they would occur in a safe and controlled virtual world. VR bridges the gap between theory and practice. Students learn theory about a certain topic, which they can then experience in an interactive 3D environment, giving students an even more memorable learning experience. VR increases engagement levels. The virtual world lets students collaborate and learn from each other, increasing overall engagement. VR also provides major benefits to this institution providing the learning. Being that it is essentially just a computer application, user choices and actions can be recorded and analyzed to better improve the training. So what does this mean in a practical sense? Well, since 2017, Walmart began using virtual reality headsets in its training centers, called Walmart Academy. Walmart has used the technology to improve the employee experience, better assess worker skills, and present new ways of training staff. Walmart is using virtual reality in multiple ways, such as preparing employees for the commotion when customers swarm stores on Black Friday, and evaluating how workers respond to angry shoppers. Additionally, VR is being used to ascertain which employees have the skills to fill middle management positions. According to the company executives, as of February, 10,000 of Walmart's, this is last February, not this one, but 10,000 of Walmart's 1.2 million employees have taken skills management assessments using VR. Later this year, Walmart plans to train over 1 million employees across 4,000 stores using the standalone headset. Let's look at another case study. Between 2015 and 2017, there was 24 electrical incidents at Intel with just as many near misses. This translated to over $1 million in cost. 90% of the root causes were behavior-based, caused by employees not following proper procedures. Intel created this VR project around their electrical safety recertification course. The tested audience, most of whom have worked at Intel for years, are used to taking and passing the electrical safety recertification course in a web-based training format. However, 75% of these trainees struggled to complete the same training in virtual reality. Why wasn't theoretical knowledge translating into practical knowledge? Was it the equipment? Well, Intel found that most of the issues centered around the trainees' lack of experience with electrical safety equipment, a low familiarity with tools, and no clear understanding of the proper sequence for task execution. In fact, most of the trainees in the web-based training and VR electrical safety recertification course, people who have been taking the course for years, never had and never would be expected to execute the tasks required by the program. This represents a major procedural and safety gap that wouldn't have been discovered or solved without the assistance of VR. Weighing the cost of development against the response to these findings and the benefits, Intel's model concluded that their first VR-based corporate training course had an estimated potential 5-year return of investment of 300%. Now, we can't just go around converting everything into VR. Believe me, it won't work. But we can take a look at a few applications and maybe see where virtual reality can fit in. Weapons Locker is an application built in-house by the Enhanced Performance Innovation Center. Allowing a learner to freely familiarize themselves with firearms can build learner confidence, increase firearm safety, and reduce the time that an instructor needs to spend teaching. Many people are timid to try something that they may fail in real life, but by removing that mental roadblock, learners are able to figure it out for themselves. This experimentation and feeling of satisfaction when the learner actually learns can increase learner retention. Weapons Locker is a step-by-step training application that allows users to get hands-on experience assembling and disassembling firearms. Users begin by learning how to properly disassemble a firearm, then once familiar, can challenge themselves with gamification elements such as time disassembly. Recently, we have coordinated with Corrections Canada to implement this into their training. Although this isn't directly training, understanding the benefits of VR is key to designing future VR programs. By using VR exposure therapy, a therapist would be able to create situations to help the patient learn to manage their phobia. For example, treating someone with a phobia of flight. This can be done by initially having virtual flights that are 100% guaranteed to take off and land safely without experiencing any turbulence. This guarantee can give the patient the confidence they need to take the initial steps. And being that the therapist can slowly tweak the virtual situation to start to incorporate the patient's fears in a controlled and safe manner. Applications for treating mental health are growing at an exponential rate. If you want a lot of great information on the topic, I would recommend viewing the link. In the VSTS, the Virtual Squad Training System, an accurate simulated environment is created in virtual reality, allowing for a multi-user combat training. This allows the young soldiers to experience the real-life situations of combat in a safe and controlled environment. The system allows multiple trainees to enter the same virtual area where soldiers can cooperate as a team. Unlike simulations in a regular training camp, the environment closely matches the real-life situations in a war zone. It's also much easier to recreate specific scenarios with elaborate setups in a virtual environment compared to the practical Hollywood-style pyrotechnics. Wrench VR is a highly detailed race car mechanics simulator that tasks you with maintaining your team's race cars. It allows gearheads to realize a lifelong dream, work on cars within the comfort of their living room. A cutaway view allows you to look through the engine block to see how the internals move, twist your crankshaft, and watch the pistons travel. And while the game doesn't yet possess the detail of rusty bolts or goobered threads, Wrench serves as an excellent practice for those looking to familiarize themselves with the detailed anatomy of a complete car. Think of it as virtual reality snapped together model. This is a practical replacement for real-life wrenching, geared towards those who don't have the resources, whether that be storage, time, or otherwise, for the real deal. Playing Wrench will provide a slice of what it's like to build an engine from the ground up. From these examples, you can see some specific use cases start to pop up. As I said before, we can't just start cramming virtual reality into every form of training. We need key use cases to make the most of the tools that are being offered. For example, if the scenario is dangerous to perform in reality, one of the best cases for the use of virtual reality is in dangerous scenarios. As you can see in the image, climbing trees and using a chainsaw can be a dangerous endeavor without proper training. In virtual reality, you don't run the same risks, and it allows for users to attempt to correct any bad behavior before they actually tackle the scenario in reality. On the other side of things, performing medical procedures that could potentially risk the lives of other people could also make use of VR training, as you don't run the risk of endangering them. Or let's say the scenario is costly or difficult to access in real life. A common situation that occurs for many companies and organizations is a lack of access to the training tools or locations. Often I hear about parties only having occasional access to blank, and therefore can only have one hands-on training session a year. On the other side of things, access could be easy, but incredibly expensive to perform, such as exercises with helicopters, boats, or other expensive equipment. Another use case would be if I really need the user to feel like they're there. Training scenarios that require simulated stress or pressure can benefit from VR. VR has an innate ability to trick users into believing the situation is actually occurring and can produce emotions that other training tools can't. Placing a user in a dangerous situation causes them to react different, and they can forget proper procedures. It's also been proven that VR is an effective tool for sexual harassment prevention training, presentation and communication training, and to treat anxiety, phobias, and depression. Or let's say I want to train motor skills and not just remember the steps. As seen in the Intel case study, it's not enough to simply attempt to memorize all the steps and procedures. Often the scenarios and training applications never occur, and therefore you aren't sufficiently prepared for when it does occur. VR can be used to prepare users for these rare occurrences. Users can get hands-on experience without actually getting their hands on. All right, Nick, you convinced me. VR has potential, but I don't even know where to look or start. Well, too bad. Just kidding. We'll dive a little bit into that now. Choosing the correct implementation of VR is very important to creating a successful application. It can be tempting to just go for the most powerful and expensive solution, especially if the budget allows for it. But understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each kind of VR will allow for much less headache when it comes to implementation. Low-cost headsets are portable, affordable, and allow for easy content creation. They come in basic forms, such as cheap plastic or cardboard, and usually run off of a user's phone. Users can learn almost anywhere at any time due to the small size and space needs for the headset. Due to the restricted number of controls, it's easier for users to pick up and begin using low-cost VR headsets. But once your application requires a little more hands-on experience, it's time to look at the pricier devices. Medium-cost headsets try and blend the best of high and low-cost VR headsets. They allow for limited room-scale interactions while keeping the controls relatively limited. Due to the increase in fidelity, you can have more complex or visually appealing applications while still maintaining the ease of use as far as time to learn the application goes. It's portable while still staying on the cheap end. Depending on the headset, you may require a smartphone. Recently, the Oculus Quest and Pico VR have released devices that don't rely on any external hardware, such as a computer or a smartphone. These range in the $500 area, but allow for the most fidelity at the lowest cost. High-cost VR interactions allow for incredibly complex interactions with a full range of body motion. If the application requires precision and immersion, this is the kind of VR headset you'd be looking for. Due to its size and space requirements, it's not very portable. Complex interactions mean that the user has to spend some time learning the application before they can dive right in. But due to the variety of controls and tracking capabilities, almost anything can be created to work with this VR setup. Figuring out what you want to do with VR is key before investing, as you can save yourself some money. There are many different ways to distribute VR content, both internally or externally. Internally, deployment is very straightforward. Essentially, just load the application onto all of the appropriate devices. With external deployment, it is slightly more complicated because you have to count on the user to properly configure the application or headset. Now, this process is largely done automatically by one of the many digital storefronts. So the requirement is to generally just point the user to the right resources via a link. Now, the choice for the instructor or employer is which digital storefront to choose. Depending on your targeted hardware, this decision may be made for you, as some devices only support certain storefronts. If the app is not meant to be publicly accessible and it will be sent as needed, there's also the option of sending people direct download links. If you're wanting to see what the world of the possible is, then these links are a great place to start. You can see what's already been made. If you're going down the development route, this triangle is a key thing to remember. Everyone wants the best of the best. A custom solution that only costs pennies and is put together incredibly quickly. The reality is that you have to choose your approach. If you want a solution that's good and cheap, it will take time to create. If you want a solution that's fast to implement and well put together, it's not going to be cheap. And finally, if you want a cheap and fast solution, it may not be very good. You can't get all three, and if you can, let me know what your secret is. So we've made mistakes over the years, and here's some of the lessons that I've learned. So always maintain a consistent and high frame rate. A low frame rate in VR can cause motion sickness. It also affects the user's immersion with the product and their ability to believe it. From past experience, we have found that frame rate is the most important thing in a VR product. If you can't hit the targeted frame rate, you need to reevaluate and find a solution to make sure it is stable. Always make sure interactions are intuitive. A good VR product should have intuitive interactions. Basically, what that means is the user should be able to easily navigate through the application without needing to read a big manual or requiring outside assistance. There's a lot of effective ways to direct the player on what to do without forcing them to read a bunch of documentations. You can use subtle cues to show the user where to look or maybe what they need to do next. In the past, we have designed our environments to have a natural flow to direct the user where they need to go next. There's a ton of theory on different ways to teach users on what to do in VR. You can pretty much take a whole course on that alone. Always identify target hardware in the initial stages of the development. In the past, we have had to change the device we are using halfway through our development process, and it can be kind of a pain to go back and have to fix everything to work with the new device. So you really need to think about what device your VR product is going to use. You need to consider changes that are coming in the future and potentially plan for new things coming out too. Finally, make sure audio sources are in 3D space. That's to say, ensure that you have sound that is influenced by where you are looking and where you are positioned. Sound is an important part of immersion, and our brains are exceptionally good at knowing when a sound is out of place. This is another contributing factor to VR sickness. If you turn to listen to a sound and it still sounds like it's behind you, then your brain gets confused and it may cause unease. Never move the player unexpectedly. When the player does not intend to move, any movement can cause motion sickness. Intent is very important in terms of how your brain believes VR. When users are immersed in the virtual environment, they truly believe they're there. Sudden movements that weren't initiated by the player causes the brain to believe something's wrong and may cause sickness. Never rotate the player or change the up direction. Rotation, especially when involving the up direction, can cause major disorientation. This is one of the reasons astronauts need to train so hard to live in zero gravity. For the same reason as not moving the player unexpectedly, you need to be careful when rotating the player unexpectedly. Finally, never change the input or control scheme once it's been established. Changing the controls can frustrate the user, and once frustrated, learning becomes harder and susceptibility for sickness increases. VR applications are already a drastic change from the world the user is accustomed to, so you need to make it simple enough for the users to adapt to what you put together. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to my quick intro into the world of virtual reality. I know it can seem daunting, and I understand that I went over a lot of ideas very quickly. I invite anyone here to ask any questions in the chat or raise your virtual hand. You can also send me an email at this address, and I'd be more than happy to reply. I may not be able to answer all your questions, but I will absolutely do my best.
All right, thank you, Nick. We do have some questions in the chat already, and I can see that some of our guests are asking specifically about frame rate. If you want to address those first.
Yes. So what's the question on frame rate? Apologies.
Yeah. It says, what is the frame rate scale? How is it measured? And the next response was, would guess minimum be about 30 frames per second, but what's the optimal for best user experience?
So on regular computer applications or 3D applications, 30 would be the minimum. But when you're looking at a headset or when it's right up against your face and it's the goal is to immerse the user into this virtual world, you're looking at a 90 frames per second to try to make the user feel comfortable. And for those who don't necessarily know, frame rate is basically how fast and how quickly the application is running. Things like graphics or how good the computer is or anything that's within the application can affect how quickly it can run. So having a stronger or better headset means that it's easier to accomplish better frame rate. When you have a low frame rate and you're looking around and at say something like 30 frames, your brain assumes that there's something wrong because again, when you have that headset on, your brain doesn't understand that you're looking through a machine. You're now immersed. So suddenly you can't see right and your brain thinks there's something wrong with you and it starts making you feel sick. So 90 frames is usually where we try to hit.
All right, great. Now we have a few questions about using XAPI with VR. So how would you say you capture learning experiences in VR using XAPI?
So on a technical side, everything that we've developed in-house has been built in Unity. And we've actually put together and released on GitHub a Unity XAPI package that all you really need to do is insert your LRS endpoint, and then within the code of the application, you can send statements just as you would any other training application. As to what you're tracking, that's going to be on a case-to-case basis. I would, I've seen before where people have tracked absolutely everything. I think identifying what's important and what you want to track and store in that LRS is key. And it's, it can vary. For example, in the weapons locker application, we wanted to see, how fast people were disassembling, like the parts, what part of disassembly they were getting stuck at, and kind of creating a basis for what an expert would be and what an amateur would be in the application. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and these are coming into the chat right now. So, and everyone who's typing into the chat, you can also feel free to unmute. That is A-OK. Just introduce yourself and ask your question. But someone did ask for a link to the GitHub repo for the Unity example, if you have that.
Yeah, I can get that right now, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Is there such a like a fidelity matrix model that acts as a decision support tool to determine the level of detail needed for a particular VR experience?
So I don't have a fidelity model per se. I think honestly, like I've said before, frame rate and ease of use and speed are the most important thing. What fidelity does is help the user feel more immersed and more, integrated into the application. So I think it also comes to your use case and your goals, right? So, if the training was, for example, a tank simulator or a simulator where you don't necessarily need it to be realistic, but you want them to, remember the motions and remember the steps, then it doesn't need to necessarily have high fidelity and be completely realistic. But if you're trying to get emotion out of them, or if you want them to feel what it's like to be in the scenario, so for example, PTSD or sexual harassment or dangerous scenarios, high fidelity might mean that you get more of an emotional response. So it's a matter of trying to evaluate your individual use case and what your end goals are.
Just to jump in, it's Bill Rayler here, the director of the Canadian ADL Partnership. We had started work on a mobile app that would look at the use of simulation, walk the user through a series of questions, and provide solutions in terms of what the right solution was. Unfortunately, the doctor that we were working with on that was posted, and we kind of had to shelve that project, but that's something that we've always been looking at bringing some more life back into. So if there are partners on this call, please reach out to either Nick or myself, and we'd be happy to re-engage and look at that. I think as we look at some of these new emerging and disruptive technologies, the more support and scientific support that we can put around their use will only further their use.
Thanks, Bill. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right. What about Unreal Engine for developing VR training?
So Unreal Engine and Unity are, pretty well in the same boat. It's honestly kind of up to your development team or who you're going through. I know a lot of development teams prefer Unreal Engine for realistic VR applications, as they have a lot more support for realistic development. Our team has kind of grown a preference to Unity just for rapid development and support. There's a lot of support out there for various applications, and they have great documentation and forums that really help out. So that's just kind of what we've grown attached to. But there's no real one is better than the other really at this point, in my personal experience. I'm also going to post the XAPI plugin for Unity. I've just posted it in the chat, so you should see the link from me.
All right, looks like we have a hand raised from Mitchell Bonnet.
Yes, not sure how well you can hear me. Do you foresee that Microsoft, because of its position with the U.S. Army, may get more into the generation TSP generation mode, say in the area that Unreal and the other and Unity are now in, because of that contract? So the question is basically, is Microsoft going to do to them what Panasonic did to Betamax? Or
So I guess I'm not exactly versed on that situation, but I know that Microsoft has actually, invested a lot of time into virtual reality themselves. So I know they released the mixed reality headsets a little while ago that were actually really well done and really easy to use, but they didn't pick up. So I think right now their main focus and what they're going to invest a lot of time into is the Hololens. And I'd be a little surprised if they jump back into virtual reality headsets, at least for a little while, because Unity, Unreal, and all of the vendors like HTC Vive and Oculus have a pretty tight hold on the virtual reality realm right now, and so pretty hard for competition to come in. The only thing you might see is with Facebook requiring users to log into their Oculus headsets, you might see a market of independent headset vendors come out, like Pico. I know I'm just throwing a lot of names out there, but that's kind of the best answer I have to that question.
All right, thank you. We have another hand raised, Camille.
Hi, Nick. It's Kamil Andrzejewski. I believe we've discussed in the past when I was at DND. I have a question for you. Do you have any experience or input about the upcoming adoption of the WebXR standard? Seeing that one of the issues with the adoption of VR is the requirement to install software, do you see WebVR being an alternative to that issue?
So had you asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said yes. I think WebVR and WebXR is one of the coolest, if not it blew my mind back in the day. The ability to not have to install an application and just load up a website like you would any other application and be able to run it off your headset was great. With the release of standalone headsets, I'm pretty confident you're going to see a big movement in that direction. With for example, the Oculus Quest 2, the headset is incredibly powerful. It doesn't require a computer, and it does everything on its own, and it has a lot more fidelity, a lot more detail, and it can have a lot more computing power than WebXR can meet. So I think that's the direction things are going to go. I still think WebXR has potential. As you don't need to download an application, so you could theoretically have like an LMS kind of equivalent full of VR applications. So in the world of training, there's still potential, but the standalone headsets are kind of where I'm seeing things going.
All right, thank you. Let's see. I don't see any other hands raised, so we're just looking through the chat for questions. Have you tested AR glasses? Is the question that just came in.
So I haven't tested AR glasses. I've read a lot of articles. I've looked a lot into it. It's I think it's got a lot of time before it's ready to go, I would say, for the public. And honestly, I think 10 years down the road, this conversation that we're going to have now about AR is going to be kind of moot, because AR is going to take off in an incredible way. I think AR is going to be very prominent in the future. But I think, it's just not quite there yet as far as, the glasses and really small kind of frames or, small headsets such as glasses. I just don't think it's there yet.
That's fair. All right. We had one question come in while you were speaking about rotation. So can you allow your user to rotate using the joystick on the controller in this way to decide when they rotate?
Yes, so that's not an issue. I think the point I was trying to get at is, you don't want to force the user to move. You want the user to initiate these actions. So you want everything to feel intentional, or at least something that they're accustomed to. So for example, if you're using a joystick and you press left and right, the user knows what it's about to happen and they can kind of adjust to that. You might still get some people that get a little motion sick, but it's a lot less, prominent. But let's say, for example, you are standing in a building and you have an earthquake simulator and the ground falls beneath you and you start rotating the player unexpectedly. That's when they will start feeling sick, because their brain doesn't know what's going on. They assume there's something wrong with you, and then you start feeling sick. So everything has to be intentional, because this is, the argument will come up where, roller coaster simulators, right? Like why, the user's moving on their own, not by their own volition. But the thing is, you're simulating something in real life that they know, they understand, and they can expect and anticipate. But if it's avoiding actions that they don't anticipate, because that's where you're going to see the problem.
Just to add to that, it's Bill Rayler again. We've had great take up for VR in support of our recruiting. We also have new motion driver sims that also have VR support that are being used for driver training, as well as we've got a full simulated urban environment in that environment that they're actually using to train on exercises, etc. The one thing that's impacted us with COVID is actually VR and multiple use of the unit. So we're still trying to work our way around that. We don't have enough money to dedicate a VR station to every individual. So that's been one of the challenges we're dealing with as well in Canada.
Hey, Bill, it's Wayne. I have a question for you. Are you working with some of your colleagues in the Royal Canadian Navy in your training transformation, especially with the Canadian Surface Combatant program, where they're going to be detailing about 13 ships in the early 2030s? I think right now they're starting to think about early cadre training. Have you been in contact with any of those folks? Are you working with them?
So definitely connected to Commander White, working with them on the new cloud-based learning environment, trying to push for their XAPI integrations in other areas. Down to the school level, not so much, but we are available. So Wayne, if you can connect them with us, that would be greatly appreciated. Sometimes it's easier to do it from outside than it is inside.
So on our OpNav project down here, the art project, we are going to be giving a brief and a demo to the Surface Combatant program office this coming Friday at 10 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be 90 minutes, some really good stuff we're going to demo. So if you'd like to join in, I'm sure you would be more than welcome. I can have a invite shot out to you.
We would definitely love that. Thank you so much. Great talking to you too.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm jealous of your new house.
Okay, we have some questions in the chat for you, Nick. For folks where VR headsets are not an option, they have to use a browser. Are modern browsers up to the task? Older browsers have memory limit issues. Do you know anything about that?
For folks where VR headsets are not an option, have to use the browser. I mean, it depends what the task is, I guess. I'm not sure if you're asking, are you using a VR headset with WebVR, or if you just mean browsers in general running 3D applications. So I think modern browsers have the ability to tap into WebGL, and modern browsers can actually do a pretty great job and can handle a fair bit of fidelity. So if your question is, can I run 3D or other kind of more complex applications in the browser, then yes, absolutely. It's going to be researching into WebGL and modern frameworks that can handle that.
All right. Are there any Unity Marketplace assets you would recommend taking a look at when developing VR?
So the Unity Marketplace is a phenomenal resource in general. There's a lot of there's a lot of assets that we've pulled on there to help us in development. It's become pretty commonplace for them to put in their description if it's VR compatible or not. One of the biggest challenges we had was water, for example, in VR, but we managed to look through the different resources. So I guess I don't have any necessarily specific assets per se, because it's going to really depend on what you're making. But I guess what I would suggest is that you look at VR compatible, or low poly is another keyword that you'd be looking up when looking through the marketplace. Because for those who don't know, polygons refer to how complex a 3D model is. And the more polygons it has, the harder it is on your system. So low poly would indicate that it takes up less resources to run. So a low poly asset would run very well in VR.
Great, thanks for that answer. We have another question. What headset combination has given you the most success?
So at the peak of headsets coming out and changing incredibly fast, Oculus released their headset and HTC released their headset, and then Microsoft came out with mixed reality headsets. We kind of test them all, and the one that we were the happiest with at the time and had the most success with was any of the mixed reality headsets. And so for those who don't know, Microsoft open sourced their VR headset technology, and so a lot of companies came out with their own VR headsets. So I forget exactly which company we went with, but I know Samsung released their own VR headset, and others released their own headset. And we find any of the mixed reality headsets were really good, as you didn't need external cameras to track where the controllers were. Because historically with the Oculus, you had to have 2 cameras on your desk. With the HTC Vive, you had to have the 2 room cameras. And so when mixed reality came out, they had something called inside out tracking, which means the headset actually tracked the controllers for you, and the controllers being the ones that you hold in your hands. So we actually use that for our virtual recruiting center recruiting application, and we had a lot of success with that. And I would say that's the one that was our favorite for a little while. The current one that we're very excited about is the Oculus Quest. Now it keeps changing, and they keep releasing newer versions that are dramatically better than the next. So we're hoping it slows down a bit so we can have one consistent headset that we can, really sink our teeth into. So that would be one I would look into as well.
Just to add that though, the Quest has an issue in terms of the links with Facebook. So we are also looking at the Pico headset.
Yeah, so the Pico headset's another headset that doesn't require a computer. It's all inside out tracking as well. It's a little pricier than the Oculus Quest, but it also doesn't have any proprietary software. It's just a shell, and it runs off of Android. So you can just easily load any application into it.
All right, and we have about 10 minutes left. So if we've missed any questions in the chat that you really would like us to answer, please feel free to unmute and ask. We do have one ask that, can anyone share details on the Microsoft open source project?
So if you mean the mixed reality headset, I'm not entirely versed on it. I just know that they released a lot of, I believe the code and the hardware requirements to create these headsets. And so anyone was able to create mixed reality headsets. I haven't done a lot of research into this because we haven't really looked into doing this ourselves. It meant that a lot of other vendors could create their own. And I will comment, Al recommended the HP Reverb G2 as the premier Microsoft mixed reality headset. I agree, that's the current big mixed reality headset that's out there right now. There's been like, the VR keeps shifting so quickly, it's hard to keep up with what headsets are available right now and which ones are discontinuing and which ones are, are new. So I know the HP Reverb G2 is the latest mixed reality headset, and is probably your best bet if you want to go down using the Microsoft software for VR.
Just to jump in quickly, this webinar was tough for Nick to do because we had to cover the basics and the general area. But what it's really shown me is there's a need for a VR community. So if you want, reach out to Nick or myself, Bill Railer, and what we can do with the ADL family is create this VR and mixed reality community so that we'll have a place where we can go to actually share projects as well as work on these issues.
So, Bill, this is Wayne. One of the things that I've been working on is the idea of being able to use like a high value authoritative source document used in product support analysis, such as maintenance task analyses, and how to automatically extract out learning objectives and competency frameworks from that maintenance task analysis. Because essentially all the things that you need to teach and learn in a classroom for maintenance troubleshooting are really buried in that MTA. I had the very same question for outputting virtual reality. Do you think, or have you looked into, looking at technical data packages, parts lists, graphics and the like, and finding a way to sort of combine that all together into some kind of formulation where you actually can output a virtual reality environment based on the data inputs going into it?
So there's a Canadian company, Wayne, that's actually done this. So Modestry out in Halifax has worked with Man Diesel as well as Volkswagen, and they've got the pipeline where they actually do S1000D all the way through to the asset, and they actually link it to an inventory system at the same time. So they've done that. Obviously, you and I need to connect, and I'll look forward to the meeting on Friday and see where we can integrate and support our Navia as well as link into what you guys are doing down south. So expect a follow-on email from me, okay, after Friday?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot that we can talk about in terms of not only just virtual reality media and how do you develop that, but all the way up to credentialing and workforce development. There's a lot of commonality in there that I think we can really talk about. And I have spoke with the people at Modestry. It seems like they're doing a really great job. Talk to you
perfect.
soon.
Good, sounds good.
Yeah, it's Brad. I will say that all of our talk about this is clearly outlined in the ConOps and in our SOR that you guys have seen. So I'm glad that we're making this reconnection, rekindling this. Wayne's been helping us out incredibly on this, and so we're just looking forward to moving forward according to those requirements that we've written for the future training system, particularly the digital framework portion.
Full support, Brad.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left, and I see Mitchell Bonnet has his hand raised real quick.
Right. I just wanted to make an attempt to answer a question somebody asked about the Microsoft HoloLens Army thing. And I'm going to steer away from anything that's sensitive. In much the same way that training for the First World War and the Second World War changed how training products were developed. The process became more systemic. I think the same thing is going to happen because of this contract. If you throw $32 billion at anything, it's going to have some sort of a industry effect. So I think what the goal there is, and I'm not involved in that program, but I think what the goal is to set up a process where individual training is created that soldiers use the non-downrange version of the apparatus for. Looks more like a Arnold Schwarzenegger sunglasses than anything else. And those training products that are made in the schoolhouses get converted or upgraded into collective training products that are then used in mission rehearsal. And at some point in the mission rehearsal, you put on the classified gear that's attached to the helmet that I'm not going to talk about. But I think the important thing here is that this is going to throw a lot of money, I believe, at creating that process for creating these materials and maintaining them at scale. Yeah, it's more AR than VR, but I think it's pretty much the same population that's on this call, at least you younger people, that will be involved in that. So I think it's going to have some industry effect. I'm just not sure how great it will be or how soon it will happen. Over.
Great, thank you.
We're watching it in Canada and can't wait to see it roll out, but are not involved.
Okay, well, I think if that naturally wraps it up there, I think we're all out of questions unless anyone wants to sneak in one in the last 2 minutes. Or if Nick, if you have any final words you want to say to everyone?
No, I'm kind of overwhelmed at the number of questions that we had. It really shows that, you know, people are excited by this. They have a lot of questions and they want to kind of make this happen and make VR training a reality. And I think that makes me very excited. I know there was a proposal for a VR community practice, and that really excites me. So I look forward to kind of seeing where this goes.
That was an action item, not a proposal. Okay, Nick?
You got it. Sorry.
All right, that was great. Well, that's a great conversation that we've had today. Thank you everybody for joining and for sending in all those great questions and the suggestion to have a community out of this. That's amazing. And then thank you, Nick, for your presentation, and thank you, Bill Rayler, for joining in with the questions at the end. And we have another webinar coming up next month. It's not put on by the ADL initiative, but it is one of our folks. So I'm going to paste a link into the chat in case you're interested. It is Impactful Specifications and Standards from the Total Learning Architecture with Andy Johnson. So you can go check out more information there in case you would like to know more. But thank you to Nick, and thank you to everybody for joining. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
Yep.
Thank you all. Good one.